Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about charter schools and their enemies. This is a fantastic book, Charter Schools and Their Enemies. I'm going to read off the chapter list, and I'm going to see if I can find. Chapter 3 was amazing. It was called Hostility. And Hostility, so Chapter 1, Comparisons and Compatibility. Chapter 2, Charter School Results, basically saying charter schools are better than the average school in New York State. Chapter 3, Hostility. It's basically a very depressing chapter on why they just want to get rid of schools because it threatens teacher unions and other things like that. Chapter 4, Accountability. Accountability for not only charter schools, but even regular public schools. He was really talking about, sometimes even regular public schools don't hold to the same accountability. Chapter 5, Student Differences. And then Chapter 6 is Dangers. And that was it. There's only 6 chapters. And half this book, by the way, is sources. So if you look at half the pages here, half the pages are sources. So reading this book, it's actually smaller than it looks from the outset. There is 200 pages, I think, but it was only 100 pages of reading. Because there's so much sources in here. Yeah, it's only 130 pages of reading. But this is an absolutely fantastic book for anybody who's a libertarian, especially for me, or anybody who has a different mindset than most people. You should definitely get this book, Charter Schools and Their Enemies by Thomas Sowell, and it tells you really what we should be basing our education system on. We should be trying to improve our students' performance on our tests and on our we need to make sure that the knowledge sticks in our students. But we're not going to be able to do that in a self-entitled teachers union that only cares about the teachers and not the parents and the students. Those are the clients we need to offer a better product and service for them. We cannot have a monopoly on education. We need people to compete. And so this is the alternative economy to what we can have. And charter schools are tax funded, and yes, there is some bribery and there is some terrible things that do happen in charter schools. But I would argue that charter schools, for the most part, have certain policies that will improve our economy. Maybe I'm wrong, but the basis for an economy, and what Adam Smith says, is that we need education. Adam Smith, by the way, the Wealth of Nations. He says we need an education in order for people to have wealth. You need education in a certain trade in order to have wealth. Well, we're not going to be able to do that with a monopolization on public schools and monopoly. You go to let's say a school, right, a high school, and there's a certain district that controls it, and these certain districts are controlled by bureaucrats, not by people of the best interest monetarily wise, but people who have a political interest. See, in a politics versus economics. In economics, we're worried about the long-term effects of things, right? Our economists are always worried about production. They're worried about, how do we improve the standard of living for everyone? Politicians are more worried about what's the next election cycle going to look like. And all this rhetoric that makes them look good. It doesn't. And then you short-term consume things for your long-term outlook politically. But again, I would argue you can't do that for the longest. Like, again, even John Markin Keynes even argues that eventually we're all dead in the end, so we're going to end up doing it anyway. So John Markin Keynes in some way acts more like a politician. But you look at Thomas Sowell, and he doesn't want to be a politician. You could tell. He doesn't have the fortitude for it. But I just think that if Thomas Sowell was running the Department of Education, we would have a much better education system, in my opinion. After reading this book and looking at the hundreds of results for why charter schools work and why monopolization of education is just absolutely awful and doesn't produce the right results, and these school districts need to be weakened a little bit, and I think the problem is that who's going to fight a monopoly? You know what I mean? It takes a lot to fight a monopoly, especially something that they claim to hide behind these kids, right? But yeah, and they want more pay, but there's no actual results for this pay that we're paying. Let's say we pay more money. The results, like, he talks about when they gave like $300 million to Washington D.C. The freaking supplies weren't getting to the people in Washington D.C. It was going straight to the union and just being siphoned off. So clearly, it doesn't even matter how much money you throw at it. The monopoly has ultimate power, and then you can't control it. So it's very interesting to see a monopolization education just absolutely harm the average person. And he's mostly talking about the inner city kids. And he says, like, the test results for the math results are actually way higher than English, because English can be taught at home. English is very it's not as influential in school as math is, because math you're mainly only taught in school. You don't really go home and learn math. And so when he looks at the test results, oh my god, charter schools make up, like, I would say, like 25% more of the grade. Charter schools. It was ridiculous. So when I looked at the results, I was actually really impressed. And he does so much research that the fact that our academics are not looking at this, it kind of saddens me. The fact that they care more about the money that they're making than the actual charter schools, that is kind of sad. And we should try our best to improve the world, knowing that these monopolies are still running. And there's so much shady stuff that happens, especially in areas that I've lived in. We do need more charter schools. We need more trade schools. We need more competition. Because let's say one school provides a job for these kids, and let's say you have two communities that are relatively similar in wealth, right? They're both poor. You have one community that goes to trade school and get a job at the end of it. The job might not be good, like, it might not feel like the best job in the world. You might hate the job, but you make tons of money and you can survive relatively. You're not struggling for food. The other school makes you feel good. They say they offer these quote unquote good jobs, but at the end of it, when you get this degree that makes you feel good, by the end of it, you either have to join academia again to reteach it to somebody else, or you can't get a job in that field. So that's the problem with this monopolization of facts and information in the school systems, is all these people are getting stuck in this monopolized system, and it acts like a pyramid almost. But if you had multiple pyramids instead of one big pyramid, like a monopoly does, you have multiple little hierarchies fighting for power instead of one big hierarchy. I would say you would have more economic activity. You would have more information sharing. You would have less hate. You would have so much more in our society. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I have this weird thesis about the world, but I really do think that we need to stop these monopolies, like education. Education is one of the biggest monopolies there is out there. I actually think it's bigger than the war industry. I mean, you look at the war industry, we spend, $600 billion? Yeah, we spend, I think, over $1.2 trillion on education. So, I mean, everyone's like, oh, they're always worried about big pharma or big army or whatever. That's nothing compared to what we spend with education, at least with taxes anyway. It's just like, we need to slow down, and we need to think about how we're going to do things. And I believe the first thing we need to do is say, no, unions, we're not funding you right this second. We're going to find a way to increase the output or the results for our students. Our students come first, then you guys can come next. We can't just have jobs for the sake of having jobs. We need results. And the problem is, if you just, you let everyone pass in a school because once the teachers union makes it look good, eventually you have nobody to help society once society if society collapses. There's nothing you can do at that point. So, that's what I like about charter schools and academies. He provides a really good solution. But it involves a lot of hurt. The solution. There is no easy solution to anything in this world. And again, economics is not about solutions. It's about trade-offs. And especially when Thomas Sowell always says that, it's about the allocation of resources, and there's always a limited amount. There's always less than what people think there is. And so let's say you taxed all the billionaires in the world, right? Every single, or at least in the United States. Let's say you tax every single billionaire in the United States. In 3 months, I'm not even joking, we would run out of money. Our federal government spends so much money, we would run out of money in 3 months. Okay, just because billionaires control a lot of influence, and don't get me wrong, they probably do in some extent. Without them, we would not pay for nearly half the stuff. We tax them all up front. There'd be, first off, no incentive to tax. And secondly, well, you just tax them all up front. There's no more billionaires to tax, and then you de-incentivize investment. It's a whole mess. So there's no property rights at that point. Your effort is your effort to society at that point. Everything you make gets taken to this all-seeing government or whatever. So I mean, that's an issue. But that's the thing. That's the general gist of Thomas Sowell. It's like you gotta create incentives, and you can't just start taxing people or start monopolizing things, government run, and expect people to act like chess pieces. And he has another book. I haven't read it, and I don't have it on me, and I probably won't have it. But I know the gist of the book is similar to The Road to Serfdom, which I have on my bookshelf. The Road to Serfdom, and he does talk about F.A. Hayek. Thomas Sowell's a big fan of F.A. Hayek, even though F.A. Hayek disagrees with Thomas Sowell on economics. But he says about F.A. Hayek's knowledge and decisions in his book, Thomas Sowell's Knowledge and Decisions. He says that a lot of politicians think that people are like chess pieces. You think if you can boost their income, that they'll create the right incentives. You higher taxes on billionaires, and you give money to people that that they'll change their behaviors. People are inherently flawed already. You cannot just change someone's behavior by changing their environment. They could actually just destroy the environment you just created. And so you need to find out why this happens instead of just doing a bunch of policies and expecting something to happen. I mean, people says, "Oh, we need to do something. We need to do something." And I'm like, well, okay, but what if the thing we want to do has a negative result? What if your good intention thing that you want in this world causes a bad outcome? I know it's a hard question to swallow, but just think about it. I mean, you could very well be wrong, and in that case, what do you do? What if everything you believe is wrong? Or something like that. And I could be wrong. In this world, there is no solution. It's only trade-offs, like Thomas Sowell says. I mean, maybe that's a little bit of wrong in some circumstances. Maybe there is a solution to some things, but most things I don't think do have a solution. I think you always have to balance people's opinions. You need to find a middle ground. And so, again, the problem is, I do think that in our society, we do sacrifice way too much for teachers. I'm not saying there's some teachers that claim they don't make enough, and maybe that's true. I mean, you look at rents, but every time you spend more money on a salary on a teacher, you boost the rents of our economy. That's just the way it works. It's set up by design. I mean, if you boost a teacher's union up, right, you are going to increase property taxes, and then you're going to boost up rents eventually. That is how economics works. And so the teachers that have expensive rents are going to complain. And guess what's happened? They're going to boost the teachers union again, and then the rents are going to go up, and it's going to keep happening. And guess what? Price controls don't work because now you've limited the supply. Now what you've done in properties anyway, you've not created enough incentive for tradesmen to go in and fix the homes because now they're not getting the rent money they need. So it's like, what do you do? I mean, there's always, again, like I said, there's trade-offs. You cannot have price controls. You cannot just boost people's money and expect there to be the same, because it eventually circles to the economy and their rents go up again. So again, you can't just say, "Oh, we need to give these people more money," because you do that, you're going to create another list of problems. You can't do that and we're already starting to see late stage capitalism or Keynesianism, I should say. Late stage Keynesianism in our economy where we print and borrow a bunch of money, and then we ask for more money, and then it goes back into prices and it reflects our economy. And so that exactly happened to Germany in the 1920s when they printed a bunch of money because they were paying off debts from other countries like we're doing now. And so the stock market at the beginning was going down, but the prices kept for everything else went up because people lost trust in the market. Now, eventually, the price of the stocks did go up, but it took about a good 3 years, I think. So, I mean, expect that to happen in our economy. Now, I don't think we're going to become Weimar Republic Germany. I don't think we're going to do that. But if we ever did, or at least de-dollarization happens, which is basically when a bunch of countries give back our US dollars, you can actually lose trust in society in a very long period of time. So, but it's very interesting, Thomas Sowell, when he talks about weird things like that. I mean, he's one of the weirdest economists because his background is so different from everybody else. Compared to F.A. Hayek, I mean, F.A. Hayek, at least he was in a background, his family's very privileged when he started, like, he's very different from F.A. Hayek, in a lot of ways. I do personally like F.A. Hayek, but I'm on this Austrian kind of, Chicagoan kind of school theory. I do think I'm a mix of both men in terms of like what I think about the world. Am I right? Probably not. Nobody's right. I don't think anyone is. I think there's always going to be trade-offs, and you will never get anyone to agree with anything. And so, I wanted to make I really hope that this book, I hope more people read this book. That's all I'm going to say. The 6 chapters, especially chapter 3, I don't know why. Thomas Sowell, every time he writes a chapter, it's always chapter 3. It's really good. All his books. Basic Economics is one of the best chapters. Chapter 3, Price Controls. Probably hands down my favorite chapter in that book. And, man, I cannot, like, you make something free in price controls, you still get negative outcomes. Like, I just like this, the way Thomas Sowell writes. He's so simple. He puts a quote in an article, and I do think that he needs to use sources more professionally, but that's the only thing I have to say. Other than that, he's a good writer. Anyway, now, you are someone, and I'm someone else, signing out, talking about Thomas Sowell and all the rest. Here we go. Goodbye.